Hey everybody, um, I'm back and it's another rainy day. Probably going to stay inside most of the day today. Looks like some writing this morning and ironing clothes this afternoon. Ain't that fun? But I don't have anything left to wear, so got to do it sometime. Um, today kind of reminded me of the setting of one of my novels, and I thought, well, why not read that one today? So today I'm going to read from Listening to the Sun, which is set in Montgomery Center, Vermont. And I think this chapter really kind of sums up the nugget of the story, what's going on and to whom and why. So Jesse and Christina are the two main characters. They've known each other before, but Christina has just returned and she doesn't know anybody. I know, kind of trite, but this is a little different because she has come back in a totally different state too, which will be explained in the reading. This is like 4.5 pages, so if you wait till the end, you'll see what your gift is today. Thanks. The chapter title is Rumors of Spaceships. On the way back from Stan's, Jessie hadn't said a word. She still found it difficult to believe that Christina might have had contact with extraterrestrials, and though he had asked her a few questions, she hadn't been able to answer. Would it have been easier to deal with her if she'd been kidnapped by humans, raped, tortured? His skin crawled as options rolled through his mind, options he really didn't want to consider, options that ranged from the silly to the terrifying. He clamped his jaw tight. By the time they reached St. Albans, the sun had retreated behind high black clouds, and the day had turned into a gloomy gray evening. Traffic had been light on the highway, and the snow cleared from the road, so they made good time. They passed the intersection near the state troopers' barracks. Then the light at the next street turned red, and Jesse shifted down. His old knee injury told him there was snow on the way, and he hoped they'd get home ahead of it, but that wasn't the only thing on his mind. Even though it had been hours since they had spoken to Stan, their strange conversation still reverberated ominously in his thoughts. If Stan was right, Chris could have permanent injuries, both physical and mental. If he was wrong, it left Jessie exactly as confused as he'd been for the past 24 hours. Whatever had happened had been traumatic enough to turn her hair white and alter her personality. How much longer could he put off trying to find someone who could help her? He patted the pile of library books beside him, their solidity comforting and real. Books. No matter how many innovations computers made, he still loved the feel of the written page. He had relied on books to take him through his childhood. They'd kept him company for many years in his adult life when he felt he'd never love again. Stupid piles of paper with leather bindings. He patted them again and stole a sidelong glance at Christina, holding his breath with the beauty the winter lights played upon the blue-black lengths of her hair. God, he loved her, and she puzzled him, even before this had all happened. She had played havoc with his mind, keeping him up late at night, causing his heart to want to escape through his ribs, convincing him there'd never be another woman. But now the part of her they'd never known, her mind, was even more mysterious to him. The longing to reach for her became an almost physical pain. He blinked back some of it and concentrated on the dark, shadowy road in front of him. Jesse remembered hearing fireside stories told by Montgomery locals about strange lights in the sky, lights rumored to belong to spaceships, and tales about people disappearing. Some family members insisted that their loved ones had been taken, abducted, but he'd given them as much weight as he did old Vermonters' bear stories. He figured half of them were outright lies, a quarter half-truths, and the other quarter just absurd. Would he ever find out the truth about what had happened to Chris during the 7 years she was away? Did he want to? He sighed deeply, the rumble in his chest emitting shakily through his tight throat. If Christina had been taken away by some kind of alien, it would explain her new language and the state of shock she was in when the guy in the limo handed her over to the Rutland police. Of course, a lot of things could have sent her into deep shock, could have turned her hair white, could have caused her to revert to meaningless sounds and babble, things Jesse didn't even want to consider. Rape, torture, bestiality. He shivered. Maybe someday they'd be able to talk about it, but Chris still wasn't coherent enough to explain what had happened. Maybe she didn't want to, or couldn't. He sneaked another peek at her, catching her sitting like a teenager, her legs tucked underneath her, her fingertips on the edge of the window, her nose pressed against the glass. Her eyes had finally stopped watering from the contacts, and she looked just like she had before she left, disappeared, was abducted. A sluggish line of Holsteins crossed the road ahead. Jesse downshifted and waited for them to pass. The cows slumped past his headlights, dirty and tired. They wouldn't look much better until after mud season in April or May. Tourists always thought of Vermont as the state with green rolling hills spotted with Holsteins and daisies, or in the winter, pristine and majestic mountains where they could ski all day and party all night. Most visitors never saw the cows the way they really were, hungry, tired, and dirty at the end of the day. Nor did they realize that Vermonters had to be exceptionally strong people to deal with the endless winters. He watched the cows walking, their tails switching back and forth as they meandered toward the barn at their own pace. Some of them came dangerously close to the Jeep, but Jesse didn't get nervous. He had often seen herds split up in 2 columns and encircle a stopped car in the middle of their path. They were dumb animals, and he didn't envy his friends who'd chosen to farm. It was a hard life. One of the cows looked into the cab of the Jeep, her big black eyes curious. She let loose with a deep moo. Moo! Chris's voice echoed through the Jeep, as low and timorous as the cows. Moo! Jessie glanced at her, surprised to see her totally engrossed in the Holstein, her lips pursed, her eyes on the cow. "I don't think you'll be able to communicate with that old milker, Chris," he said, patting her on the leg. "Cows are too damn dumb." She looked at him, and that instant he saw the woman who'd haunted his dreams for so many long, lonely years. He yearned to kiss her, to taste the full pursed lips, to run his hands through her hair, to feel her body warm and alive next to his, to touch the curve of her back. He clutched the steering wheel in his hands and urged the feeling to pass, quickly, instantly. "All beings communicate. You just do not know this one's language," Christina stated defiantly as she turned back to the window and continued mooing until the cows wavered into the dim light coming from the barn. When Jessie started driving again, he thought about how positive she sounded, like she knew what she was talking about. Maybe Christina knew more about languages than he could ever imagine. But talking with a cow? Could she really have gotten something out of mooing at beasts? "There's a lot of things you can learn from books, but there's also a lot of things you can learn by just living," he said. God, that sounds pathetically philosophical, he thought, thankful she was wearing the contacts and couldn't read his mind. The jumble of thoughts he'd been trying to organize since leaving Burlington made his head hurt, and now he wasn't even making sense to himself. But Chris nodded, a serious furrow etched between her brows, as though he'd just made a divinely sage comment on the nature of things. He watched her for another long moment between throwing the Jeep back into first gear, the innocent wonder in her eyes, the determined jut of her chin, the graceful movement of her hand as she traced a drop of water down the windshield. She was so damn beautiful, and now that she was back, he didn't want anyone else around her. No one. So, that's from Listening to the Sun, and I think you can tell from that scene what's going on. It's set in Montgomery, and one of the reasons I wrote it is because there's a lake there that is like glass, and there's a mountain, there's 3 mountains actually that surround it. And there was a time when I was practicing for a triathlon on that lake in a canoe, and 2 storm fronts came in over the mountains, one from the east and one from the west, and they met in the middle of the lake. It's the first and only time in my life I've ever seen fireballs. And from that moment on, I heard every mysterious story about what happened in that lake. Lots of weird stuff. So that kind of spawned an idea for the book. And that's that one. So if you've listened to it all the way and you want a copy of Listening to the Sun, if you get it, let me know, and I'll send you a copy of one of my writer's hand journals. And I hope you're all staying in and being warm and having a good holiday season. Keep in touch. Let me know what you're reading. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.